Welcome. In this video, our goal is to solve for x. We are looking for the x value that makes this equation true. Now, since our equation has fractions, 2 to be exact, we want to simplify it so that we can solve for our x. And what I like to do when I have an equation with fractions is to get rid of them. Get rid of the fractions. And the way you do that, if you have an equation, is you multiply both sides by the least common denominator. So in our case, the least common denominator, so this 4, I said we had exactly 2 fractions, but really we have 3 fractions, because 4 can be written as 4 over 1. So our least common denominator in this problem is actually the product of all our denominators. So x times x minus 2 times 1. But we don't need to include the 1 because it just becomes x times x minus 2. Alright, so we are now going to take the least common denominator and we're going to multiply it to our entire equation. So I'm going to first write it this way and then I'll show what it looks like once we distribute it. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to multiply it to every term inside the parentheses. And what that's actually going to look like, I'm going to come up here so we don't run out of board space and rewrite it. We're going to have x times x minus 2 times 5 over x plus x times x minus 2 times 3 over x minus 2, good, equals 4 times x minus 2. Alright, so I have distributed that x times x minus 2 to every term inside the parentheses. Now the reason I did that is so that I can cancel all my fractions. So this x will cancel with that x, this x minus 2 will cancel with this x minus 2, and I have actually nothing to cancel over here on the right. So then my new equation becomes 5 times x minus 2 plus 3 times x equals 4x x minus 2. Well, this is great. Now I have an equation that doesn't have any fractions in it, so I can proceed to solve in some way that I have solved before. Let's first simplify both sides. So now I'm going to distribute the 5. And that gives me 5x minus 10 plus 3x equals, now distribute the 4x squared minus 8x. At this point I say, I have a quadratic equation. And I know how to deal with quadratic equations. Most always my first step is to get it into standard form. That is, get everything on one side and write in descending order. So 4x squared minus 8x as I moved the 3x over and the 5x over, plus 10 equals 0. So if you need to, take a minute, hit pause, and see if you agree with how my bottom line I got to from the line above. I moved everything over to the right, but then rewrote it from the left. Alright? So now I'm going to move to a new board and rewrite that. Oops, I'm going to move to a whole nother board. And we have now 4x squared minus 16x plus 10 equals 0. And so I want to now try to solve this equation, and I might try to simplify it first. I see I can divide everything through by 2, and I get 2x squared minus 8x plus 5 equals 0. Now what I'm hoping, although I see that that is not true, that this factors. So it doesn't factor, or at least I can't see it initially that it factors, so I will use the quadratic formula. Well, so that becomes, remember what it is, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where this 2 is my a, this minus 8 is my b, and this 5 is my c. So x is going to be equal to positive 8, because that's the negative of negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 64, that's negative 8 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 5, all over 2 times 2. All right, let's see if we can simplify this expression now. So we're going to try to simplify the inside. So we have 8 plus or minus the square root of 64. Now 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40, so minus 40 all over 4. So this becomes 8 plus or minus the square root of 24 over 4. Beautiful. That's our final answer, which could be simplified further, or we can leave it just like that. All right, let's try one more. Let's go back to this board, and let's see if we can solve this one. In this case, it might be a little bit harder to tell what our least common denominator is. It's not always the product of all the denominators. So here we have a factor of x minus 1, and here we have a factor of x minus 1 squared. So we wouldn't say x minus 1 times x minus 1 squared. We would say our least common denominator is just x minus 1 squared times x. I'm going to put it over there. Okay, so now let's multiply just like we did before, both sides by the least common denominator. So x times x minus 1 squared times x over x minus 1 plus x plus 2 over x minus 1 squared equals x minus 1 squared over x. Oops. I didn't distribute that yet. I'm sorry about that. So this really is 1. I haven't distributed. Now let's distribute my least common denominator to every term inside. Now this time when I do it, I'm going to go ahead and cancel along the way. So I see that x times x minus 1 squared over x times x over x minus 1, one of my x minus 1 squareds will cancel. So I'll be left with x, one of my x minus 1s, another x, and my fraction is gone because one of these canceled with one of those. Plus, now this time I see my x minus 1 squareds, x minus 1 quantity squareds cancels with my x minus 1 quantity squared, and I'm left with just x and x plus 2. And this is equal to x minus 1 squared. Does everybody see why? My x canceled with that x. All right, let's expand and see if we can simplify nicely. This time we have x cubed minus x squared plus x squared plus 2x equals x squared minus 2x plus 1. All right, now I have a cubic. I see this cancels nicely. And I'm going to move everything over to one side. And so now I'm going to have x cubed plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. And that is a tricky problem to tackle.